right, here, time for now for another episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. I've been working on a new speaker reel or reel for my company about producing it. And so there's nothing like spending the last 6 days editing video and watching yourself. Speaking of watching yourself, if you're watching us here and you're on social media, please hit the subscribe, share, like, or comment. If you comment live here on the show, we'll attempt to bring your comment in. If you want all the episodes of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online. Over 90 episodes and one released every Wednesday. And if you haven't already heard about, we have the Engaging Conference will be October 21 through 23 this year. You can get a free ticket at engagingvirtualmeetings.com/CON, or you can scan this beautiful QR code. Speaking of beautiful QR code, we have our next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. She's a productivity expert. She's a dynamic keynote speaker. I should know that. I believe she's a member of NSA, National Speakers Associations. She's a former chief marketing officer. So hopefully we'll get our best 2025 marketing tips. Her company is called So Productive, and she empowers individuals and organizations to defeat burnout, embrace purpose-driven productivity, and create thriving environments. Oh, and we got to ask a few questions about this for neurodiverse teams. Please put your hands together for the one and only Sarah Ohanesian. Oh,
thanks, John.
Wait, I have sound effects here. What happened to my sound effects? I have a, oh geez, I'm gonna have to do this again. Here, how about this? That's better. Okay. I did have walk-on music for you. Now look, I'm like looking at like, what did I break my walk-on music? I think I did. I told you it's 2025. I told you I was going to break something here.
Everything's different now.
including the year. How are you doing today? The sixth day here of January 2025?
This is great. This is one of my first real full day back in the office with client work. And so I'm happy to spend it with you. I think it's just a great way to launch the new year.
Were you ready to launch? What did you do to recreate? I'm just curious, like a busy people when they take time off, what's like one of the top things that you did to get away from work and, recreate is what I love to say.
I actually think that recreate sums up my holiday break to a T. I'm working on Keynote 2.0. So taking my Keynote and getting it to the next level. And so I worked with a keynote director right before the break. And then I was able to spend some really quality time with it during the break. For me, John, it felt like I had a creative space. I had a little more time to think. I was able to percolate and really get into it and take some long walks. And it gave me the space to think about, what do I want this next version of this keynote to look like? And I feel like I made a ton of progress on it over the break. So really excited about that going into 2025.
Space is so important, like even we were talking about white space at a conference, taking time away that's not content, that's not structured, that's not something. And I do believe more and more that that's really valuable. Speaking of valuable, for my friends who don't know you yet, Sarah, why don't you do me a favor and take a minute to introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do in the world?
So, John, I'm really a woman who is just obsessed with figuring out what happens if we could do our most important work in life. What is that most important work for you? And what would happen if you could actually accomplish that important work? And so this journey has really led me to think about a couple of things. Call it a productivity parade that we're sometimes on. I have a thing I call the push it protocol, and I have a quicksand conundrum. These things are what typically stop us from moving forward. And so what I do with that information is I help people unlock really their full potential. I think we all have infinite potential if we just had a little white space and time to unlock it. And so ultimately, this has led me to, how can I help people accomplish the most important work of their life? And with the key being that they aren't sacrificing so much of themselves to get there. So it's really a sustainable race towards accomplishing their most important work. So that's what I do. And I do it all through what I call compounding productivity.
Oh, compounding productivity. Okay. What is compounding productivity to you?
So compounding productivity is, we've all heard it's snowing outside for me today, but I like to think of it as the snowball effect. It's the momentum. So when we get something started, which is hard to do, it's hard to get something started. It's hard to get that flywheel in motion. But once we do, the momentum can really become quite unstoppable. And so for me, compounding productivity is talking about what are those right activities that propel us into motion, that get us moving forward so that we can really become an unstoppable force.
And how do you do that? Okay, so it's 2025. I'm sure people are interested about how to do this. What's one or two things that people could start to create compounding productivity?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that I find is there's a lack of clarity, and that can be at work, that can be with your own goals and priorities. But a lot of times I work with a lot of different teams as well on this, and we're often out of alignment. We think we know what the goals are of the company. We think we know what those strategic priorities are, but there's actually a stat that came out recently from Asana says that 40%, John, so nearly half of employees don't know how their work adds to the company goals. They don't know how their work adds value to the company goals. And so one of the things I love to do is work with both individuals and teams on, do you have that clarity on what really matters? Are you in alignment with those company and goals that you have for yourself personally? So I think January is also a really great time to make sure that you know what is that clarity piece that you might be missing. To me, clarity is 90% of the productivity equation.
Well, actually surprised Asana didn't report that it's higher. There's also been some stats in the 70, 80% range of the number of people who are partially or 100% checked out of their company, right? So that somebody was talking about, you remember when there were rolling brownouts and blackouts like in California, and they
Yeah.
didn't have power, and they said, we have the largest rolling brownout and blackout at it, but it's not in California, it's in your company. Our number one question in the consulting part too, it sounds so simple, but I got to tell you, if you ask it a lot, many people can't answer. And the question is, what do you want?
Yeah.
Right? And it sounds simple. It sounds like, but if you really ask people, and then sometimes they diatribe, right? You ever had somebody, what do you want? And I'm like, I gotta have a website. I gotta do these things. I gotta get on my Peloton. And I'm like, no. Those are all like action-based things. Like, what do you really want at the end of like all those types of things? And so I find myself spending, a good portion of my time asking, what do you want? Like, do you find the same thing, or do you find something else? Or do you amaze when you find somebody who actually has clarity before you ask them?
It really depends. I kind of see the spectrum of it, but I think sometimes what happens is people get stuck in, oh, do I need that life's purpose? Do I need that huge goal? And it's okay if someone said to me once, I don't really know if I can solve world hunger. Is that okay? I'm like, of course it can. What is that goal for you? And it doesn't need to be this big thing. This is for you. You don't need to compare it to anyone else. And so, John, one of the things that you just touched on is what I call the quicksand conundrum. And what that means to me is that people are literally, and if you can see me on video, like clawing themselves almost out. And you can picture quicksand, right? We're used to the
Mhm.
cartoons used to have it, and the characters would get stuck in quicksand. And as they tried to climb out, they were actually getting sucked back down and into the quicksand.
Yep.
And that's what I find a lot of clients doing. So to your point, they think they're working on the right things. These are important, possibly urgent activities. I need a website. I need to be on all the social media platforms, whatever those things are. And sometimes, if we really evaluate, they're not in alignment with what you want. And they might not be in alignment with what your company wants for you. So we're busy, busy, busy. And this is part of what's leading to that burnout epidemic that we're faced with now, post-COVID epidemic,
Right.
is we're trying to claw ourselves out by doing all this work, and we are busy, and that work is taking up a lot of our time. But is that the most important work that you're meant to do today? And that's a question I love to ask people because it can be quite eye-opening actually when we're stuck in that quicksand.
All right, Sarah. So how did you get into this? I want to know, did you pop out and say like you grabbed a mic, right? Or is like did speaking come to you in some other form after working at some other company? How'd you get into what you're doing now?
Well, it's funny you said, did I pop out like that? In a way, I think I did, because I have always been a natural performer. So I was a musician. I was someone who loved to dance and be on stage. And so that performance side of me had actually gone away for a little while. Through college, I got practical and got a real job. And then I started to notice that part of me was missing. And as I started developing my business and I got into speaking, I realized that performance side of me was a large piece that I was missing. So I got into speaking quite organically. I thought, well, if I speak, it'll help me get a few clients. That sounds great. And then I realized this is a profession. And you and I have met through National Speakers Association. This is a society of professional speakers. And so my commitment to that craft and the performance and the privilege that we have to get to be on a stage and impact audiences, that part hasn't been organic at all. That part has been really strategic and methodical, a development stage for me. And it's just a tremendous, tremendous career.
And when did you like turn into this career? Was that recent or a little bit ago?
Yeah, so I'm 5 years in. I got laid off because of the pandemic, and like
Oh,
so
yeah.
many people did at that time. Um, I had been thinking about doing this for a little while before then. And then when it happened, I thought, well, if this isn't my sign from the universe, I don't know what is. This is a big sign. And I just took it and ran with it. And that's something now that I try to empower my audiences with is you asked earlier, what do you want? What
Yeah.
do you want? And that can be something internal at a company, that can be something that's really special for you, but it's about taking action and going for it. What's the worst thing that can happen? And that's the attitude that I went into this business with. And I really started it right away and I didn't look back. And it's just been a tremendous career for me.
Well, talk about, white space or space. Like COVID was the biggest space provider on the entire planet at one time. And it was actually really interesting. Earlier today, I was talking with a marketer who markets specifically with speakers. And, she was always telling people to work on their business, not in their business. Right? And
Mhm.
that COVID turned out to be the best time for speakers to work on their business. And so many of them went to go and seek and improve stuff that they would normally not have the time to do. And so she turned out that she had to increase her staff by 40% to help all these speakers who were trying to figure out how to navigate the pandemic.
Awesome.
So yeah. So I mean, was that what did you do in March of did you get laid off around March of 2020 or did you have a little bit later somewhere around there?
No, I have to say the owner of our company just decided to retire and shut doors. And I have
Oh,
to say, from a business perspective, he called it. I mean, I don't know how he knew, but he knew. He said, we're not going home for 2 weeks. This is going to be much longer than that. And so for
yeah.
me, it was actually right at the beginning. It was March of 2020. And to go
Mhm.
home and to have that space, for me, it was just such a blessing. And then I know you do so much work with virtual meetings, John. For me, it was a tremendous opportunity because as I was getting started as a speaker, I had these virtual meeting opportunities to really try different content out and to see what would stick. So when everything got back in person, I felt like I was totally ready to go. So the way that COVID worked out, and I know it was a horrific event for so many people. I always try to look at what good comes from some of these things. And for me, COVID was the timeline of how it worked out, aligned with me wanting to start this business. So it worked out well for that.
Well, I get to talk to a lot of new speakers and they're always wondering, what advice can you give me? And one of the top advice I give them is get on more stages for crying out loud, right? There's no
That's
way
it.
to hone the craft of speaking than by speaking.
Hmm.
And I think that virtual gave us one of the best ways to do it. So there's a keynote I've actually delivered probably 400 times since March of 2020. And, and I tell people it took me 17 times to get it to end on time. Right. And just because there was too much content, it's a process of cutting.
Hmm.
And so virtual stages, I think, are a really important place for people to do that. And of course, especially during COVID when there were lots and lots of audience. I'm kind of curious. So then what did you do in your speaking, or what did you learn on the virtual side to keep your audiences engaged with you?
Well, I think one of the things that we mentioned earlier, my work in the neurodiversity space, and so that when you're thinking about and so neurodiversity is just different brains. We all have different brains, and so I think about it as really we often say a spectrum, but to me it's just this circle, and all the brains that exist in the world are just in this large circle together. We're all just different points in the circle,
Yeah.
and so what's interesting about that is as we, and I say we, my business partner, Jeff Gibbard and I, we
Mm.
were crafting keynotes on neurodiversity. And we were really thinking about, well, what do these different audiences, these different brain types that we're speaking to need from us? And what do they need to have to be successful? And John, very quickly we realized, okay, sure, a neurodiverse audience needs this, just like every audience needs this. There's so many different brains in every single audience. And so I think that's really important for listeners to take away. Like there's no one brain in every audience. Every single one of your audiences has a variety of brains in it. So your question, what makes it engaging?
Yeah.
For us, that meant a lot of variety. So we wanted movement. We wanted variety in sound, in tone, in,
Mm.
how are our bodies moving? How quickly are we going through slides? We added game shows and polls,
There we go.
sound, video, just different things so that it always felt like it was moving. And so at very first, I said to Jeff, there's way too many slides. Like there's just way too many slides. But he was right in that we realized the slides keep it moving. And especially in virtual, sometimes that change of slide can just make someone look at their screen again. We have so much competition in virtual presentations that for us, movement and the changing of the type of content we were delivering was really, really, really critical. And then the other thing, we don't want to waste time. I mean, I'm a productivity time management expert as well. Of course, I don't want to waste time, but there's always that awkward beginning of meetings and
Mhm.
virtual sessions sometimes. And we didn't want that. We just wanted to dive right in, like get the show on the road, get to the agenda. And I think the other thing I would say is having impact early and
Yes.
often and reminding people like this is a critical point, this is a critical point, you're not going to want to miss this thing, and just stating that was really helpful as well. So just a lot of impact points throughout to keep it engaging.
Have you ever read or seen John Medina's book here from University of Washington, otherwise known as UW, called Brain Rules?
I haven't. I have to check that out.
Well, you definitely have to check it out. One of
Thank
the
you.
things that they went and did research on and revalidated over COVID was the fact that the brain checks out at 10 minutes, right? So at 9 minutes and 59 seconds, if you have not done something different, you're just about to lose your audience.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see it like even faster, but I do agree with that every time something changes on the screen, right? And that a visual is one of them, you is the other one, right? Something else, something's great is stop talking. You stop talking in a meeting and everyone will come back here and going, did my audio break? Right? That's their first
Exactly.
question. But Sarah's use also, if you haven't heard, Sarah's using my name. So using a name is actually another technique that we teach, right? Because let's pretend like Sarah checks out. Sarah just turn off to the right, right? No, 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 I'm serious. Like, yeah, there we go. Right. And it goes, and then I don't call Sarah out, but I can say, but you know what? Sarah said something great about neurodiversity. And there she comes back.
Yeah.
And so we would actually tell people to use somebody's name in a sentence, but without calling them out.
Yeah.
Right. Because one
Yeah.
of the things we were looking at too, I don't know how, I'm sure you've done lots of research on psychological safety
Mm-hmm.
that, because if I call you out, then you might feel bad, right? And then you're
Yeah.
not sure if you're going to check into my meeting. But if I just say your name right off the hand, but I'm not really calling on you, then I know I don't make you look bad. So you come back and you yourself will go, oh, maybe I should pay attention more.
Well, and that's why I always think about this as really a conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, we're
Oh,
on
yeah.
screen. Yes, I'm the keynote speaker today. However, to me, it's just this conversation and this back and forth. I always like to think about even playing with the audience a little bit. Like, how can we have
Right.
fun together and actually make this a little bit more playful, especially if we're on virtual? I think we have a huge opportunity to do that.
And you got to show that it's live. So one of my top principles, Sarah, is I allocate sometimes up to half of my keynote time to talk to the audience
Hmm. Well,
because
that interaction is
yeah,
critical.
it's impossible for them to check out too when they're spotlighted and I'm trying to talk to them.
Well, and I mean, we're having so much fun today. To me, I want it to be fun. I
Yeah.
want this to be entertaining. Of course, we're going to learn something. That's a given. I hope in all the keynotes that people are given, I hope you're teaching them something. But to make it entertaining and engaging and fun and light and energetic, to me, that's just our responsibility as the
O-
speakers.
Okay, what's your most fun moment then on virtual in the last 5 years?
Oh, goodness. I think some of these quiz things we've done have been really, really fun. And just seeing the competitiveness come out in people all of a sudden So we're like, we're going to do a quiz. And all of a sudden, everybody's cameras are on. They're fully engaged. Like, I'm going to beat this person. I'm going to beat that person. And it was never meant to really be competitive, but it was kind of fun to have that spirit ignite. And you can just see the energy elevate immediately when we say, all right, now we're going to do this. And your energy as a speaker, they're going to model that. And so I think it's just critical. But we've had some fun moments with quizzes, polls, little competitions.
So quizzes, I used one during Kahoot during our family holiday call. We have a family holiday Zoom call, and so I made trivia about all the family members. And it was actually funny because my girlfriend, who's not necessarily the inside family member, won from the last question.
Good for her.
And it was very impressive. But there is that's that part about that, which is because Kahoot also works on speed, so it doesn't matter. I actually made all the questions pretty easy, but there were still some, so like it's funny to see too, the things that we think we know that people get wrong, and
Fun, fun.
and then that changes the leaderboard. That changes
Yeah.
the
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier is critical too. We're not trying to make anybody look bad or have a real competition here, but in
Yep.
the spirit of making it engaging and
Right.
fun, there's
Yeah.
so many cool opportunities there.
Yeah, in that natural competitiveness part too. I mean, that is the engaging part, especially in the top, if you're in the top part of the leaderboard. But there's also other dynamics, where they have the biggest mover will get named out. So somebody who jumps like a bunch of slots, even if they're not in the top, five, that's also another way to continue. And I also really agree with that. I think I used to run a lot of gamification for conferences, like you go to the expo and you visit booths and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we end up changing, and instead of it being high score in the leaderboard, because what we found was this law of 90, 10, and 1, or sorry, 99 and 1. Have you heard of this law?
No.
This is a gamification law, which is like if you run a leaderboard, 90% of the people will kind of be like, maybe, right? 9% will kind of get into the game and get a little serious about it, do like a good portion of the missions, but 1% will be your super users.
Yes.
These are like the hardcore competitive people who will do anything for points, right, inside of
Love
the
it.
game to win.
I love it.
And yeah, so what we did is that we changed the dynamic of it, and we said every time you finish a mission, you get an entry like a ticket. So that means, and then we do a raffle, and so anybody could win. Of course, the people who could win more, who did more missions, had more chances to win. But we also, once they won a prize, they couldn't qualify for any other prize except the grand prize.
Cool. Cool.
And those are all things that we changed inside of there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think one of the things that we're really mindful of, we have this kind of competition come to life, but we're very mindful that we don't make the audience wrong, or we don't want
Right.
to make any one person wrong. So a lot of
Right.
times if we do a quiz or a poll, like you really can't get the question wrong necessarily. So we're trying to set them up for success no matter what,
Yes.
while still having that kind of fun competitive vibe going.
And we tell people all the time too, you'll never forget the answer to the question you got wrong when it made you lose. You're like, I'm gonna remember that forever, right? So,
Totally.
in this part, so neurodiverse. So, why your personal focus on neurodiversity? I'm just curious about why that's one area that you focus on.
Yes, and when you asked me earlier about organic paths to things, this was the most organic path into something I could have ever experienced. So my business partner, Jeff Gibbard, has ADHD.
Mm.
And so in our work together, and what our company does is we help teams set up their productivity software. So task management softwares, project management softwares. We're certified in a few tools. We love Asana, of course. What was happening in our work together was we just kept seeing things from very different angles.
Mm.
And so eventually, and we had been friends for 15 years. So it was very natural for me and I felt comfortable to ask him, like, why is that showing up for you like that? Or why are you interpreting that way? And he was having those same questions for me. And so we
Mm.
just started having conversations around like, what does that look like for you? How does that feel to you? How are you interpreting that? And as we did, we noticed that I have classified as a neurotypical brain, which I hate that term, but it just means that my brain is more like other people's than it's the average brain, I guess.
Okay.
And then he has the ADHD. And so what was interesting is we were starting to notice that the same information, we were literally seeing it in two very different ways.
Hmm.
And what was amazing about this was that at first we just talked about it with each other. So one,
Yeah.
it really helped our relationship. It helped us to be able to say, okay, you're never going to see it my way, and I'm never going to see it your way, and that's okay. That can be helpful for our relationship. Then we started to share this with clients. And
Mhm.
clients started saying, oh my gosh, I'm identifying with that. I understand that there's someone on my team with a brain like Jeff's or a brain like Sarah's. That's so interesting. So then we started very openly sharing this with clients. And John, this is when our business blew up because
Hmm.
people were saying, we want this. When we're
Yeah.
designing a productivity software and how to customize a tool for a client, we are considering the different brains on their team so much more powerful than saying, okay, here's the way you're going to look at this. No, how do you want to see it? How does your brain interpret this information? How do you like to see your work? How do you process your work? How do you pick what to work on next? So these type of questions, we're now asking clients this so we can really deliver a tool that's truly customized for them and the different brains on their team. So very organic. And then we started saying we probably need to do a keynote and some workshops on this because this is something that we have an ability to talk about, that we know something about, that we
Yeah.
really want to be able to share this with other teams and people.
Have you ever done keynotes together then?
We have, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good. So
Yeah.
that's just
We have a
and
bunch scheduled in 2025.
so the whole key there is to play both sides of the brain, maybe during the keynote, something like that. And
Well, and as a speaker, John, you'll appreciate when we were building out our talk originally, I'm approaching it one way, he's approaching it another way. So even the craft of putting this keynote together was a challenge in and of itself. And we talk about that and our delivery style and how many slides and how quickly are we changing things. Obviously, we were approaching that from different ways. And so to
mm,
come to that conclusion of, all right, this is the finished product that we're going to now take to market. And of course, we're continuing to allow it to evolve. But it was really powerful exercise in exactly what we're talking about here. And so it's been a really just a cool way to work together and to be able to share this with other people. And John, I have to say, it's such a gift afterwards when people come up to us and say, I feel seen and heard for like the
yeah.
first time ever at work.
Mm.
I mean, it gives me the chills. It's an amazing, amazing thing.
What's the number one way? Let's just use words you were saying, right? For the quote unquote average or normal or the uh, high quantity to work with somebody who's neurodiverse. Like, what's one practice that you really had to pick up yourself, maybe to work with your partner?
Yeah, it's to be curious. And
Mm.
so I was just curious with Jeff and he was curious with me. And I would just ask without accusing, without judging, without trying to be negative, just say, how is that working for you? How is that showing up for you? How does that look to you?
Mhm.
And I think when you can do that with people on your team, and it's not that they're a bad person, it's not that their brain is bad, it's not that they can't do something or they don't want to do something.
Yeah.
It's just to have that curiosity around how does that look for you? And I think that changes everything with team dynamic. When we come from a place of curiosity, it's game changer.
All right. Speaking of curiosity, what have you and your partner done with
Hybrid work.
hybrid speaking?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do it together. And so what's really helpful with that is I think the power of that keynote is seeing both of us on stage because you can literally see and feel the differences.
Mm.
And I think that's cool because on a stage, we are able to just showcase some of those different talents and abilities. And we like to think about this as this is an invisible superpower on a lot of teams. And so if we can, one, raise awareness, because some
Yeah.
people have never heard this term, I would say 50% of people we talk to say, I've heard of it, but I'm not actually sure what that is. And so to raise awareness and then to be able to really show some of that from the stage, I think has been tremendous. And it's fun. It's super fun to be able to do something that we both love together. It can be challenging at times, of course, and just to manage schedules and things naturally. But it's just been a tremendous opportunity to do it together.
How'd the two of you meet?
I was a client of his many, many, many years ago, and we just formed this friendship. And I always called him my business best friend. And then from there, we decided to start a business together.
Wow. Wow. Doesn't always work out that way, so there's
It
something
does
there.
not. Yep,
Who who
yep. We're very grateful.
who is it? Penn and Teller are celebrating their 40th year together, I believe. So speaking
Yeah.
of duos that have that's a total duo.
Well, and I think a lot of times the business relationships don't work out or friendships don't work out is because we
Yeah.
get frustrated and we don't understand and we
Yeah.
blame that person for the frustration. And we never do that. We're always like, oh, what do you need right now? What do I need right now? And just that open communication, that constant curiosity, I think for us has been the key to our success together.
Well, I don't know. There's another book that's like that too. It said, if you make a best friend at work, you're 7 times more likely to stay.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I think to have fun also, we always want to have fun. We want to work with good clients. We want to do good work.
Yeah.
We want to be amazing and do amazing work for amazing people. So
It's one of my quotes. If you're not having fun, you're probably doing it wrong.
probably.
All right. Speaking of fun, what about the future? What do you think is the future for virtual and hybrid for So Productive?
Yeah, so John, nowadays you can Google everything. You can put it into Chat GPT. I mean, if you want an answer to a burning question, if you want information, you can get it in the next 5 to 10 minutes. You can probably find all the information that you want. I heard a crazy stat that I think it was we now have on our phones access to more information than George Bush had when he was president.
Wow.
At
I
our
recently,
fingertips.
I just looked and my stat was I currently have 200 gigabytes of photos and videos on my phone right
Yeah.
now.
So we have access to information. So my point to tie it back to the future of meetings, I think as speakers, someone could literally take that same chunk of time and find all the information that they want. So our responsibility is to make these ideas relatable
Yes.
and to make sure that there is a human connection. That is why we are hired as speakers. So our audience can actually do something with the information. They don't lack for information, but that ability to be able to relate it to themselves and know what to do next, I think is a really our core responsibility as speakers and leaders.
I also like to add what I call distillation, right? Like speakers are distilling, and so when you're an expert in an area, you're consuming like this gigantic amount of information, and what you present in a 1 hour keynote or even a book, right, or any other type of thing. To me, like a book is a summary of like 10 years or more of experience, and a keynote is like 1 hour of the best information. And the whole point why you pay a speaker is because one, they're bringing you the latest and most unique information that's valuable, right? And two, they're delivering it in a way that you have the highest odds that you're actually going to do something.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, that's our responsibility because again, to be up there and just shouting out facts, like they got that on their phones. They don't need you to do that for them.
And again, in virtual or hybrid, is that part of your future business plan? Are you mainly in person, or are you thinking about like how do we, section these different delivery methods? I mean, it's the same work, but it's delivered in different ways.
Totally different ways. And so for us, the future is really, we've got a very different keynote if it is virtual than if it is in person. It just
Interesting.
has to be. We do a little more performative kind of craft in an in-person keynote. We just can't do that on virtual. We have some cool props that we use. I can't give anything away here, but we have some cool things that we do in person that are just not going to work on the screen. We do some
Right.
things virtually that are just not going to work in person. So those are two very different keynotes and experiences. And so I think for us, just to keep thinking about what technology is available,
Yeah.
how can we use that,
Yeah.
and how can we make sure that we're remaining engaging with all the new tools as they become available. And John, I credit so much to you. I think your constant giving of this information to, I know I'm really involved with you at the NSA chapter leadership community, and it's just tremendous what you do for us. And you are constantly keeping us all, to me, you are raising the bar on the whole speaking industry because you're keeping us up to date on all the good info. We need that for our audiences. So huge thanks to you. But I think that's really critical going forward, that we've got these pace setters saying, come on, everybody, here's the bar, we're going to raise it, because that kind of the rising tide rises all the ships there. You're taking the lead on that.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think that many speakers figured out too that virtual and hybrid you are different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I love the fact that you have two different keynotes now that I have to think about it. I'm like, gosh, do I do that? And I'm like, oh yeah, wait a minute, I do that. Because one of the part is like this. I'm actually using the background all the time as my slide. So I have to design my slides completely different for virtual. Like in person, I'm thinking about the last set of slides, like it's got big words and it goes all the way across. And that would, for me, the way I present on virtual doesn't work, but it does work in person too, because again, you have to think about people could be sitting way in the back and they have to look at the slides. And so
Totally.
you're right. Yeah, it is two different and three different, like hybrid two is a different stage on top of that. And you really need to think about as a speaker, and as actually if you're a meeting planner, how are you going to present your information in the way that is going to be most likely? And hybrid says too, you have to present the information so it hits both audiences, which makes it the more
For sure.
challenging part.
An audience, if you are in the room and you have part of your audience on the computer, they are just as much of the audience as the people in the room. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of speakers forget that. We're up here speaking to the people in the room and oh God, oh hey, over there on the computer, I forgot about you for the last 25 minutes. Like, no, they're a part of it as well. And so for us, making sure that we are properly prepared to handle wherever those audiences are, it's everything. And those keynotes look very, very different. Workshops too, they got to be handled very differently. And John, I'm seeing a really nice mix going into 2025. I'm booked for as many virtuals as in person. So to me, this trend is not really changing much. I still have a lot of virtual meetings going on.
Well, that's good. That's great to hear on the keynote side. And I've also heard a lot of people on the masterclass side, like they deliver a live keynote that leads into, a virtual keynote, a virtual workshop. And that's a shout out to Sherry Levitan, who's got a format for her that has been working really, really well.
Yep.
All right. Well, talking about innovation, then here's my latest innovation to my podcast is while I interview you, I actually create something called the speed round. So I have a collection of questions that you got to try and answer them as quickly as possible in a rapid fire format. Are you ready for this, Sarah?
Of course.
Okay. First question, favorite food?
Peanut butter.
Organic or regular?
Organic.
Okay. Best work you think you've done in your life so far?
My keynote.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh, slow. Wow. Oh, there we go. That's what I was like. Okay.
These sounds mean I'm getting them right or wrong.
There's no wrong answer, Sarah. This is like I told you that's safe here.
I love it.
The busiest person you know that's not you.
My husband.
Your favorite speaker that is also not you.
John. I'll go with you.
Oh, wait. This is Star Trek's Engage. That's Captain Picard. Best sustainability practice.
Oh, I love not wasting food.
Oh, that's a good one. Let's see. Side note. The guy who started Adobe created a center with a lot of the money that they made from Adobe, and it now has middle school kids that come into it. And one of the best practices, Sarah, is that all the kids have to scrape all the food that they didn't eat, and put it on the compost. And the kids have gone from like 50 pounds of compost to like less than like 12 ounces.
Amazing.
In a week because they
It's
measure it.
something we can all do. Yep.
Yeah, well, we should do that one. Okay, best snow destination.
Colorado.
Oh, that's a good one.
Snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Okay, the best ADHD superpower.
Hyperfocus.
The things you don't know that you're most curious about.
Space.
Ooh, space, good one. There's some Jeopardy. Okay, have you ever seen a SpaceX launch?
I have not. No.
Oh, you got to do that in your life. You will
I mean,
love it.
online, but never in person. So we got to make that
No,
happen.
you need to see it in person. And in Florida, like Cape Canaveral or Houston. Okay. And the last one is best example of compounding productivity to you.
Taking your next best action.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Sarah, you have survived. You have survived the speed round.
So fun.
Well, thank you for joining me in a little time. If you could magically get people to remember just one thing from this podcast, Sarah, what would that one thing be?
I hope it's what I just said, to take your next best action.
And what is your next best action today? I know this is just random off the top.
Well, I'm working on that keynote. So one of the things that I like to do, John, is I have work blocks on my calendar and I have impact blocks.
Oh.
And coming up next on my calendar is an impact block. And that's where I'm working on something it's not email, it's not just getting back to people, it's not doing some sales. it's doing impact. And so for me right now, that's working on that new keynote.
Well, I have this afternoon off too, so I will call that an impact block. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. All right, we've been talking with Sarah Ohanesian, and she's just saying, she's asking you the deep question, what is your next best step? What is your next best step? Well, my next best step is to ask you, hey, if you're still here on social media with us, subscribe, share, like, and comment. If you want any of our podcasts like this amazing one with Sarah, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online. A new episode drops every Wednesday. If you haven't already, get one of our free tickets to the engagingvirtualmeetings.com/con, or join us inside of the interactive Zoom, or even better, last year, people for the first time joined us in person here in Seattle, Washington for that in-person experience. We run one of the most technically advanced hybrids that you've ever seen. And last but not least, if you want to be like Sarah, make your next best action to be a guest on my show, engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, and select interview. And you too could be like Sarah. Happy New Year. And now on to your next action. See you next time.
Always start people